Istanbul, Turkey, a man named Murat is anxiously listening to old tape recordings. He constantly measures his temperature and places a damp towel on his head in an attempt to cool down. As dates flash across the tapes, it becomes clear that Murat is documenting his experiences, including his unusual condition of synesthesia, a state where sounds trigger vivid visuals and words evoke tastes. Leaving his home, Murat navigates streets in turmoil from a severe epidemic. The virus, ARDS, has spread for 8 years, causing those infected to babble incoherently without respite. Known as a semantic virus, it drives people mad, and despite the time passed, a cure remains elusive. In response, authorities enforced strict rules, leading to widespread rebellion. Quarantine facilities are scattered across the city, and AEI, Anti-Epidemic Institution, uses the crisis to exert more control. The outbreak caused a collapse in communications, leading to economic downturns and societal breakdowns. AEI established boundaries between safe and danger zones, strictly policing the streets. Those infected were isolated in quarantine zones, forcibly separated from loved ones, which fueled public anger. Murat remains unaffected by the worst symptom, rambling speech. As he walks, he notices a girl and feels an immediate connection, imagining standing before her. When their eyes meet, Murat hesitates but finds courage to approach after spotting a white flower nearby. He mentions the lack of bus service, but she only smiles and continues reading. The city enforces a 6 p.m. curfew in safe zones, so Murat heads back to the apartment where he lives with his mother, Emel. He brings her puzzles and tapes. When she asks about soap, he admits he couldn't find it. Emel then brings up Makbule's request for them to come home, but Murat refuses, shaking his head. After a brief disagreement, Emel insists on the soap, and Murat reluctantly leaves to find it. Murat returned to the bus stop and noticed a note left by the woman he had seen earlier. The message read, "I know there's no bus service. That's why I wait here." Afterward, Murat headed to a convenience store, where he encountered an infected individual, triggering the store's alarms. Chaos erupted as the infected person rambled incoherently. Amidst the commotion, Murat noticed a young child and instinctively handed over his headphones, an essential safeguard against the virus's effects, leaving himself vulnerable. With the situation escalating, he escaped, feeling a rising fever and heat in his head. Shortly after, AEI personnel arrived and took the infected woman away in a specialized transport vehicle. 2 AEI officials discussed a man who had been exposed but left unharmed. Anton, the chief officer of AEI, showed particular interest in this. At home, Murat washed his face, but haunting visions urged him to surrender to AEI. Emel, noticing his distress, asked if he remembered his medication. Murat reassured her he was fine. Meanwhile, Anton reviewed files with Captain Sevet, including documents about Murat. At AEI headquarters, Anton watched the security footage showing Murat fleeing and collapsing against a wall. Later, Murat and Emel visited Makbule, whose son was infected. Makbule hid her son to avoid detection by authorities, fearing medical help would lead to his forced isolation. While sitting with Makbule, Arif confronted Murat, insisting Osgur was still alive and questioning him about ever seeing Osgur's body. Arif revealed a tattoo identical to Osgur's, pressing Murat for confirmation. Murat solemnly replied that if Osgur were still alive, he would have returned. Arif, undeterred, claimed he had proof. Outside, Arif privately showed Murat medications marked with the same symbols as Osgur's tattoos. Back home, Murat sifted through photos from a past life where he had been married. In a flashback, he and his wife discussed the risks they took to help virus victims, emphasizing their shared sacrifices. Murat sought out Arif again, expressing interest in meeting Errol, a mutual acquaintance with AEI access. Meanwhile, Anton continued gathering intelligence on Murat. AEI discovered Murat had been hospitalized several times due to severe fevers after the Project X fire, disappearing after his last hospitalization. Meeting with Errol, Murat and Arif learned of his network's various services. Errol confirmed he could provide information, but at a high cost. Unable to pay, Murat and Arif accepted a risky self-service option, with Murat volunteering to infiltrate AEI. Anton's investigation led him to the headphones Murat gave the child, revealing a traceable number linked to Murat's residence. He swiftly mobilized a team. With Erol's contact's help, Murat infiltrated AEI and accessed Osgur's file. He realized the body in the file wasn't Osgur's. It lacked the distinctive tattoo. Trying to erase the evidence, Murat failed. Time was running out. Murat rushed home. Unaware Anton, defying orders to leave Project X behind, deployed a special unit to capture him. As officers interrogated Amel, she discreetly placed a red pine cone by the window, warning Murat of danger. Seeing the sign, Murat fled into the night. Murat fled from relentless AEI agents, slipping behind a building and seemingly vanishing, leaving the agents searching in vain. After escaping, Murat sought refuge with his psychiatrist. In the waiting area, he nervously rambled about visiting Makbule's house, causing a stranger to worry he might be infected. At that moment, Ertem, his psychiatrist, appeared and led Murat into his office. Back at Murat's home, Anton intensified his interrogation of Emel, bombarding her with questions and ordering his team to seize anything of interest related to Murat. In Ertem's office, Murat revealed his fears, disclosing his special condition and AEI's pursuit. Ertem dismissed this as intrusive thoughts, making Murat regret seeking help. Sensing his distress, Ertem offered Murat a place to stay for the night. At AEI headquarters, Fazil, Anton's superior, planned to open a new lab amid a rising threat from the group +1. Aware of Anton's unauthorized raid on Murat's home, Fazil tasked Kanan with monitoring Anton, suspecting he was onto something significant. Later, as Murat walked through the city, a sudden explosion, an attack by +1, shook the area. Shaken but uninjured, Murat blended into the crowd and slipped away. Murat then visited a tattoo parlor where Osgur had gotten his distinctive tattoo. The uneasy artist insisted Osgur was dead and denied knowing his whereabouts. As Murat was about to leave, the artist's girlfriend subtly advised him to search for Osgur in a place known as the 6th Zone. Meanwhile, Anton's obsession with finding Murat deepened. He took Murat's tape recordings home and meticulously listened to each one. Through the recordings, Anton discovered that Murat was unable to jabber, even when trying. This left Anton considering two possibilities. Either Murat had some form of immunity, or he was a former jabberer who had miraculously found a cure. Anton shared this theory with his commander, who dismissed it, suggesting Murat might just be mentally unstable. Undeterred by his superior's skepticism, Anton's resolve only grew stronger. During a dinner, Murat confided in Ertem about the painful memory of his wife, who had been infected and eventually took her own life. Ertem tried to console him. Murat then revealed his decision to venture into the 6th Zone. Concerned for his safety, Ertem pointed out a recent change in Murat's behavior and subtly hinted at suspicions that Murat had met someone new, encouraging him to consider moving on from his past loss. Anton, still engrossed in the recordings, pieced together that Murat and Osgur once intended to collaborate with a highly infected individual, referred to as a level 6 jabberer. Osgur believed this collaboration could lead to a cure for the semantic virus. This only intensified Anton's pursuit, as he sensed Murat was key to unraveling the mystery. Murat occasionally experienced fleeting hallucinations of the girl from the bus stop, imagining brief interactions that blurred the line between reality and his mind's projections. Determined to find Osgur, Murat approached Arif, informing him he was ready to start the search, but warned of the AEI's pursuit. Arif listened carefully, understanding the seriousness of Murat's situation. Back at AEI headquarters, Fazil was infuriated by Anton's insubordination. He reprimanded Anton sharply, ordering him to prioritize capturing the +1 militants responsible for the bombing and stressing the urgency of the mission. As Murat's plan to infiltrate the 6th Zone progressed, he met Erol again. Erol explained that entering the zone required a complete disguise and a fake ID to avoid avoid detection, emphasizing the high cost. Despite the expense, Murat knew it was his only option. Meanwhile, Emil managed to slip out of the house undetected by the officers stationed there, determined to help her son despite the risks. Anton, still fixated on his investigation, uncovered Murat's psychiatrist, Ertem, as a potential lead. He instructed his subordinate, Serhat, to gather more information on Ertem. Returning to Arif's place, Murat found Emel waiting for him. She recounted the police raid on their home. That night, Makbule discreetly handed Murat money, offering her support for his mission. The next morning, Murat took Emel back to her house. Before parting, she gave him her necklace as a keepsake and said goodbye. However, as they separated, a security guard in the building noticed them. Later, Anton confided in Serhat about his frustration over failing to access Murat's file, suspecting crucial information was being withheld. Their conversation was interrupted by urgent news, a report that Murat had been spotted at Emel's building. Murat met with Errol again, realizing he lacked the funds for Errol's fee. Reluctantly, he handed over Emel's necklace as collateral, vowing to retrieve it later. Errol accepted and quickly created a fake ID for Murat. However, just as the ID was finished, the AEI arrived. Murat and Errol hurriedly packed, scrambling to cover their tracks. Anton, accompanied by Kanan, led the search. Despite the tense situation, Murat managed to stay one step ahead and narrowly escaped once more. As Fazil sat alone, he stared at old photographs of the fire incident. In a sudden flashback, the memory of that night returned, revealing his presence at the scene and hinting at his involvement. Anton arrived at a small, dimly lit room. Lighting 3 candles on a cake, he entered a space where his family awaited him, visibly infected and no longer themselves. The sight reduced Anton to tears. Murat navigated a crowded subway station. He noticed posters with his face. He was now on AEI's most wanted list. As panic set in, the girl from the bus stop emerged from the crowd. Without a word, she approached, kissed him, and took his hand. She then led him onto a train. Murat is led by the girl to the 6th zone, filled with infected people. She then takes him to a spot offering a panoramic view of the city, where they share a brief conversation and introduce themselves. The girl's name is Sul. Murat confides in her, expressing hope that she might help find his missing friend, Osgur. Sul, working with +1, reveals they need Murat's help, believing he could be crucial in finding a cure. Murat, however, angrily denies this, insisting she is wrong, and leaves the location in frustration. Desperate to change his mind, Sul risks her safety by approaching a group of jabberers. Alarmed, Murat rushes to save her, only to find she's wearing protective earbuds. Sul explains that people like her must rely on earbuds and urgently need his help. Still, Murat remains firm in his decision, rejecting involvement with +1 and departing. Later, Sul went to a warehouse in search of Arif. After asking another woman for his whereabouts, she carried a cardboard box and entered a room where Arif was waiting. Arif was also part of +1. As they spoke, Sul pressed him for details about the person Murat was searching for, but Arif withheld the information, refusing to reveal anything. Murat reached his place in the 6th zone, where he discovered old photographs of his wife, Daria. As he looked at the photos, memories from the past flooded his mind. In one of these flashbacks, Daria appeared anxious and scared, while Murat tried to comfort her. Suddenly, the dreamlike memory shifted, and Murat woke up in his old bed, pulling him back into the present. Yet, the hallucinations continued, and he envisioned Daria standing on a treadmill, smiling at him as blood dripped from her. Startled, he awoke from the nightmare and got out of bed, still shaken by the vision. Elsewhere, Fazil was briefing another officer about Murat's situation. He handed over Murat's file, subtly hinting that Murat might be Patient X from the now-defunct Project X team. Fazil warned the officer that they needed to find Murat before Anton did. Sul visited a hospital and met with a group of doctors. They inquired if she had encountered Murat, and she confirmed that she had. Meanwhile, as Murat stepped out of his house, a group of unidentified men abducted him. At the AEI office, Kanan confronted Anton, criticizing him for posting the wanted posters of Murat. pointing out that it was reckless since Fazil would likely notice them. She asserted her authority by informing Anton that she was taking control of Murat's case files, accusing Anton of cowardice and calling him out for not being able to meet her gaze. Shortly after, Anton received a text from Serhat indicating their plan to visit the restaurant where Ertem, Murat's psychiatrist, often dined. Sul visited the AEI's contact point in Zone 6, where she left a note inside. She then went to a house where an elderly woman, Susan, was firing a shotgun to scare off kids who had been sneaking a cat into her yard. Inside, Sully informed Susan that she had submitted the petitions and told her to listen to the radio that night, as she would be talking about her grandson during the broadcast. Kanan later informed Fazil that Murat had been spotted on subway security footage, and Fazil instructed her to monitor the situation closely. As it turned out, Murat's kidnappers were members of Plus One. While Murat remained in their custody, a young woman named Asli appeared to be one of the leaders of the group. Just as the group was about to attack him, Sul arrived to rescue Murat and apologized for everything that had transpired. She calmed him down and took him away from the danger. In a tense moment, Murat asked the group if they knew who manufactured the pills, showing them the ones he had. As they walked away, Sul expressed her desire to start fresh with Murat, reintroducing herself. She also mentioned reading the letter Murat had left for her at the bus station. She then invited him to join her in a live broadcast session where they introduced a professor named Can to the audience. During the broadcast, Sul opens up about her past, sharing the heartbreaking story of her high school romance with a boy named Engin, the grandson of the elderly woman she had visited earlier. She recalls how their love blossomed in a tender and sweet way until the epidemic tore their lives apart. During a protest, they symbolically formed a plus sign together, but the moment was shattered when AEI forces shot and killed Engin. This emotional revelation leaves Murat deeply affected. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Sule playfully tells Murat that her name means school in German, and they share a brief, light-hearted laugh. Anton and Serhat arrive at the restaurant where Murat's psychiatrist, Ertem, is dining. Anton aggressively corners Ertem, demanding information about Murat and refusing to let up. Sul continues her efforts to persuade Murat to help Plus One in their search for a cure. She admires his deep scientific knowledge and believes in his potential immunity to the virus. Despite her persistence, Murat explains that whenever he is around jabberers, his head heats up, a phenomenon he cannot fully understand. He confesses the real reason he's in the 6th zone, his belief that finding Osgur will help him reclaim his sense of identity and purpose. At Anton's home, his son suffers an injury, hitting his head and bleeding. While Anton tends to him, someone watches from the window. After taking care of his son, Anton notices a figure staring at him from a distance. Alarmed, he steps outside to investigate, but finds no one. Unbeknownst to him, Kanan had been the one surveilling him, hiding as he searched. She later returned to her car, jotting down the address on a piece of paper. At the same time, Fazil holds Murat's ID card in his hand. He makes a phone call, questioning the person on the other end about how they came into possession of the card. Murat and Sule take a walk, enjoying the fresh air. During their time together, Murat demonstrates how his head heats up when exposed to jabberers. After the encounter, he pretends to be infected, causing a brief scare before revealing it was just a joke. Sul can't help but laugh. The following morning, Sul introduces Murat to a group of researchers affiliated with Plus One. She has already informed them of his potential immunity, raising their hopes. However, Murat bluntly declines their request for help, telling them they will never find a cure. Unwilling to give up, Sul follows Murat, pleading with him to reconsider. Finally, Murat agrees, but only if she helps him locate Osgur. They strike a deal, and Asli steps in with crucial information, revealing that the pills Murat had brought originated from a hotel. Murat and Sule then head to the hotel to confront the owner. At first, the man reacts violently, but he eventually introduces them to a mysterious woman named Yasamin. He hints that Yasamin is the key to connecting with the manufacturer of the pills. As they spot Yasamin arriving in a car, she casually swallows a blue pill in front of them, almost as if mocking their pursuit. Just as Murat and Sul try to approach her, Yasamin speeds off. In a surreal sequence, Murat found himself running endlessly, trapped in a dreamlike state reflecting his inner turmoil and sense of being lost. In the present, Murat and Sul traveled together in a car. During the drive, Murat shared how his expertise with analog tape recorders helped him narrowly dodge a literal bullet and stay ahead in his research on the jabberers. Meanwhile, Fazil confronted Kanan about her absence and lack of communication. Kanan, focused on her investigation into Murat and motivated by Anton, requested to continue her work. Anton discussed with Savet a mysterious figure he saw near his house, though Savet dismissed it as paranoia. Anton, however, remained convinced someone had been there. Murat was offered accommodation at the +1 headquarters due to difficulties securing housing in the 6th zone. Sul assured him he could stay as long as needed. Later, during a conversation, Murat requested recording tapes, prompting Sul to take him to a local market. At the market, Yasamin approached Murat and Sula, hinting that Osgur might still be alive. Testing Murat's intellect, she posed mathematical questions, which he answered easily. Impressed, Yasamin handed him a phone, warning it would ring once, and missing the call would mean losing his only chance for more information on Osgur. Back at AEI, Kanan asked Serhat about his plans, and he casually mentioned an operation with Anton. Later, as they drove, Serhat recounted the conversation, and Anton, sensing something was wrong, immediately ordered him to pull over. Murat, now settled at +1's headquarters, was warmly welcomed by its members, including Arif. Concerned, Murat asked about Arif's mother, and Arif reassured him she was fine, easing Murat's mind. Meanwhile, Kanan covertly entered Anton's house, searching through his belongings for key evidence, including several of Murat's tapes. As she ventured further, she discovered a hidden room where Anton kept his infected family. At that moment, Anton confronted her with a gun. In the tense standoff, Anton showed Kanan an unpublished work by Murat. Anton's memory flashed back to when the epidemic began affecting children, leading to riots across Istanbul. Fear and desperation fueled mass unrest, as the vulnerability of children heightened the chaos. Murat asked Sul about +1's plan to organize a rally despite AEI's strict prohibition. Sul disagreed with the approach, calling it hypocritical and unwise. She warned that violence would damage their reputation and confided in Murat about a faction within +1 called the Hawk Wing, which had risen since public rallies were banned. Murat and Sule set out to meet Yasamin, but before reaching Osgur, they had to solve a series of riddles. When they arrived, Yasamin gave them another riddle. Murat quickly solved it, leading to a safety locker. Using Osgur's favorite scientist as the password, Murat opened the locker and found a page filled with numbers. Meanwhile, Kanan asked Anton about his family, and he explained the struggles his wife faced when their son became infected. Their conversation takes a dark turn when Anton orders Kanan to her knees, pointing a gun at her. She pleads for her life, promising to keep his secret. After analyzing the numbers on the page, Murat identifies 1919 as the year a captain sailed to Samsun. The numbers match a ferry schedule, leading Murat and Sule to an old shipyard. In another flashback, Anton's wife, Azra, unable to bear their son's suffering, removed her protective headphones, causing both of them to contract ARDS. At the shipyard, Murat and Sul find a ship named Durusu, tied to the 1919 journey Murat had deciphered. A call from Yasamin directs them to a guide who appears and demands they undress for a security check. After complying, they are separated, with Sul taken away from Murat. Anton ultimately spares Kanan, who immediately reports to Fazil. She reveals Anton had hidden evidence and presents subway camera footage. Kanan also shares her suspicion that Murat is hiding in the 6th zone and offers a contact who may know more. When Fazil asks if the original evidence remains intact, Kanan reassures him. Later, as Kana was about to get into her car to leave, Fazil played a series of recordings that infected her. Murat is taken to an unknown location and told that to save Suli, he must navigate a maze filled with jabberers. Desperate, he pushes forward but collapses, his head burning with fever as he fades in and out of consciousness. While searching for Sul, Murat hears her voice but struggles to stay awake. When he finally opens his eyes, he is greeted by a familiar figure, Osgur, who teasingly calls him Hot Skull and notes how little Murat has changed. After barely surviving the maze, Murat's fury erupts. He attacks Osgur, but to his shock, Osgur doesn't resist. Under the influence of a drug that distorts pain into pleasure, Osgur seems to enjoy the violence. Yasamin intervenes, pulling them apart and explaining that Osgur's behavior is due to the drugs. Meanwhile, Sule presses Yasamin for information about their location, but Yasamin urges her to stay quiet, warning her not to ask too many questions. When the chaos settles, Murat confronts Osgur, demanding answers about the changes in his body, his skull heating around jabberers, his immunity to the virus. Desperate, Murat begs Osgur to help him return to normal and questions why Osgur never reached out when they thought he was dead. The next morning, Osgur wakes Murat abruptly, and Sul reminds Murat of her impending departure. Soon, she is taken away, her head covered by a bag. Murat continues seeking answers, but Osgur views him as a masterpiece, the changes to Murat's skull not only making him immune, but in Osgur's eyes, enhancing his intellect. Frustrated, Murat pleads for a way to undo the damage and reset his mind. Elsewhere, Fazil discreetly hands over an address to another officer, hinting at deeper plans. Back at Osgur's hideout, Murat tries to reconnect with him, hoping for clarity. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Osgur suggests a basketball game, a nod to their past. Before they begin, Osgur offers Murat a drug, as part of his twisted way to rebuild their bond. Elsewhere, Anton discusses with Serhat and Sevet the slim possibility of saving his family. Around the same time, Fazil meets the officer again, who discreetly hands him a set of critical files. The drug Osgur gives Murat overwhelms him, triggering intense hallucinations and an emotional breakdown. Murat, consumed by guilt, is brought to tears, unable to hold back the memories that haunt him. Meanwhile, Sul informs Can that Osgur has been located. Intrigued, Can wonders if this will convince Murat to assist them with their research. However, Sul remains uncertain, knowing Murat's fragile trust in them. During his breakdown, Murat finally confesses his guilt. His actions triggered his wife's jabbering episode, leading to her tragic suicide. He demands to know why Osgur stayed silent after the lab fire if he had been alive all along. Osgur somberly begins to reveal the truth. Fazil, driven by jealousy and resentment, had been responsible for the lab fire after Osgur refused to falsify a report. Fazil's bruised ego led him to start the blaze. Osgur narrowly survived, going into hiding to evade the AEI. Unable to contact Murat without exposing himself, Osgur had disguised Murat as Patient X in his files to protect his identity. But once Fazil got hold of those files, the hunt for the virus-immune patient began, putting Murat in the AEI's crosshairs. After recounting his story, Osgur asks Murat if he's still sure about resetting his mind. Tired of being pursued and treated as an experiment, Murat insists he is ready, determined to escape the AEI and reclaim his freedom. At +1 headquarters, Sul voices her suspicions to Can, urging him to watch Arif, sensing something significant is unfolding. Tension escalates when Arif's girlfriend arrives, battered by an AEI encounter. While Arif cares for her, Sul discreetly slips a cryptic message from his book unnoticed. In the 6th zone, Anton and Sevet meet a young woman who points them to a hotel where Murat had stayed. Anton leads a raid, but the AEI arrests him before finding Murat. Murat, Osgur, and Sul head to a club. Osgur instructs Yasamin to drug their drinks, which Murat and Sul consume. Meanwhile, Fazil confronts Anton with alarming news. Kanan is infected. Fazil pressures Anton to capture Murat for the AEI, revealing that Anton's family has been taken. Left with no choice, Anton agrees. Under the influence, Murat and Sula dance and share a kiss. The next morning, they wake up beside Yasamin, hazy from the night before. At breakfast, Murat asks when they'll start their work. Sule suggests using +1's lab, and Osgur agrees on the condition they sneak in at night. Following Fazil's orders, Anton and his new partner, Haider, search Emel's house. Anton secretly reassures Emel that he's protecting Murat. Emel, trusting him, advises speaking to the security guard. Before leaving, Anton takes Murat's instruction diary for his mother. Later, Sul shows Murat a note stolen from Arif. Murat recognizes a hidden code linked to a book, though they're unsure which one. Sul suspects +1 might be planning an attack on the AEI. Murat narrowly avoids AEI capture when Anton secretly leaves a red pine cone as a warning, allowing Murat to escape. That night, Murat, Sul, and Osgur sneak into the lab to examine Murat's brain. Sul overhears Murat asking Osgur if he can revert to his old self, enraging her, as she views him as the key to curing the disease. Later, Murat and Osgur meet a patient, discovering they'll be working with Haluk, a level 6 jabberer. Haluk, calm and intimidating, silences others with his presence. Both men know how dangerous he is. Sul confronted Murat about resetting his brain, urging him to reconsider, reminding him that people relied on his unique abilities to find a cure. Murat, however, was firm. He rejected being used, accusing +1 of being as bad as AEI with their endless experiments. He refused to be anyone's lab rat. At AEI headquarters, Fazil intensified the search for Murat, interrogating Emil. Despite his threats, she refused to reveal her son's location. Frustrated, Fazil ordered her custody until she cooperated and distributed her picture to escalate the hunt. Osgur offered Murat hope, suggesting there might still be a way to reverse his condition. Elsewhere, Sul, staying at Susan's house, expressed frustration over her inability to decode the cryptic message. She feared something disastrous was looming at the rally, suspecting the extremist group, Hawk Wing, of planning violence. Committed to keeping the rally peaceful, she reminded Susan of +1's mission to find a cure, not incite violence. Susan suggested Sul plant her roses at the rally as a symbol of peace amidst the uncertainty. Meanwhile, Anton discovered Arif's address from a clue hidden in the plant taken from Emel's house. Murat's heart sank as he wandered the streets and saw his mother's face on a wanted poster, realizing the search for her had gone public. Anton approached Arif, presenting himself as an ally, claiming he was there to help Murat and revealing that Emel was in custody, but unharmed. Anton asked Arif to deliver a message to Murat, promising he could save his life. In return, Arif demanded the names of the officers who attacked his girlfriend. Anton agreed. As the Kokeli Memorial neared, tensions within +1 escalated as they prepared for a rally defying AEI's orders. Sul, determined, took Susan to +1 headquarters, and together they distracted Asli. While Susan kept her occupied, Sul stealthily stole something from Asli's drawer, complicating the group's plans. Murat, distressed, informed Sule that Emel was in AEI custody. Consumed with guilt, he blamed the alterations to his skull for his family's suffering. Serhat kept his word and provided Arif with the names of the officers responsible for the attack. Though Murat feared for Emel's safety, Sul reassured him that he wasn't alone and urged him to stay calm despite the overwhelming fear. During their conversation, Arif handed Murat a letter from Anton requesting a secret meeting. Murat, still reeling emotionally, felt isolated. When Osgur called, suggesting they go out to relieve stress, Murat declined, feeling abandoned and unsupported by his friends. Fueled by rage, Arif handed the officers' names to Hawk Wing. Knowing the group would retaliate, they launched a violent attack on the officers, and Arif, caught up in vengeance, joined in, but regret soon overwhelmed him as he realized the brutality of his actions. Meanwhile, Yasamin confronted Osgur, warning him that staying close to Murat would only bring danger. Despite her concerns, Osgur was determined to help his friend, even as Yasamin feared that Murat's presence was putting everyone at risk and threatening to destroy Osgur's carefully built life. As Murat struggles with his inner conflicts, his visions of Haluk, the level 6 jabberer, grow more intense. Drawn to Haluk, Murat seeks out Victor and spends an entire night in front of Haluk, quietly observing, uncertain of what this encounter will change in him. Murat informs Sul that he plans to meet Anton. Concerned, Sul insists on accompanying him. Together, they confront Anton, who assures Murat that Emel is safe but reveals a harsh truth. Fazil is not interested in finding a cure, but is focused on exterminating jabberers instead of saving lives. Surprisingly, Murat announces he will turn himself in to the AEI, shocking both Anton and Sul. His calm demeanor, however, suggests a hidden agenda. He tells Sul to go home and wait, implying that his plan is more complex than it seems. Murat follows through, turning himself in to the AEI. Hader and Anton begin interrogating him, but Murat's true plan soon unfolds. With Erol's help, he releases a gas into the AEI building, rendering everyone unconscious. In the chaos, Murat rescues Emil and escapes. During the commotion, Hader attempts to shoot Murat, but Anton steps in and saves him, stopping Hader. As a result, Anton is arrested for his actions, caught in the fallout of Murat's bold escape. With Emil safe, Murat contacts Fazil, claiming to have critical information about +1. He refuses to share it with anyone except Anton, knowing this will further disrupt the AEI's plans. Murat tried to pry more details from Arif, but Arif remained evasive. As they spoke, Erol arrived, and Murat seized the moment to ask about Fazil. Erol finally revealed the truth. Fazil was behind the Kocaeli disaster. He explained that Fazil was never interested in finding a cure, but was instead obsessed with protecting his reputation. The epidemic had elevated Fazil's status, making him a power-hungry tyrant. Despite Erol's warning of future trouble, weary Murat shrugged it off, claiming he was used to such threats. Meanwhile, at AEI headquarters, Fazil informed his superiors that he had suspended all security staff after Murat's gas attack, assuring them that the suspects would be captured and dealt with harshly. Outside, Fazil told Hader that Murat would regret crossing him, ordering him to investigate potential targets. Later, Osgur visited Murat, frustrated that he hadn't been told the AEI was after him. Mid-confrontation, Osgur saw Emil and quickly apologized for raising his voice. Emil, shocked, realized who Osgur was, having believed he had died long ago. Overcome with worry about Murat's condition, Emil pleaded with Osgur to help her son. Feeling betrayed, Osgur dragged Murat to another room, demanding answers. He reminded Murat of the sacrifices he'd made for the skull enhancements and grew angrier, pressing Murat to choose between his loyalty to him or his involvement with +1. At the same time, Serhat visited Anton to share updates on new information they had uncovered. At +1 headquarters, Sul took to the radio, announcing the group's defiance of the AEI's rally ban. She passionately declared that they would march to the Kocaeli monument on the anniversary, no longer waiting for permission. Murat listened as she boldly promised they would march, regardless of the consequences. Later, Sul confronted Arif, pressing him about Hawk Wing's potential attack plans, warning of the danger of withholding information. Arif, disillusioned, looked at Murat, voicing his disappointment that Murat hadn't used his abilities to help find a cure for his father and others in need. Murat confided in Sule that he planned to help Anton escape custody. Frustrated by the constant danger, Sule went to search Asli's office for more clues about the attack. Inside Asli's office, Murat warned Sule that organizing an unauthorized rally could lead to her arrest. Unbothered, Sule brushed off the warning, affirming her commitment to prevent the attack. She reaffirmed that +1 stood for justice and hope, determined not to let anyone tarnish its name. While searching, she found a coded message and asked Murat to help decipher it. Before they could act, Asli and one of her men barged in, snatching the paper from Sul. She warned them to stay out of matters that didn't concern them. Despite losing the page, Murat had memorized the numbers, ensuring they still had a lead. At AEI headquarters, Hader reported to Fazil that he found no signs of sabotage in AEI-owned buildings. He suggested Murat may have misled them with false information, but Fazil remained unfazed, focused on the grand opening of the new lab. He had transferred the jabberers there, excluding Suat to distance himself from his name. Meanwhile, Murat and Sul decoded the cryptic message, with Murat assuring her he would handle the code, allowing her to focus on organizing the rally. Murat later contacted Fazil to inquire about Anton, who was waiting at the ferry station. Unbeknownst to Murat, Fazil had already ordered Anton to kill him after extracting the necessary information. Elsewhere, Arif was confronted by a friend who suspected him of being a spy after hesitating to attack the officers. Tensions escalated until Asli stepped in and diffused the situation. At the ferry station, Anton surprised Murat by warning him about the kill order and informing him that the AEI was closely monitoring him. With help from Errol and Serhat, they staged an escape from the ferry. When Haydar attempted to attack Errol and give chase, Serhat and Tevet intervened, cornering Haydar. In the struggle, Serhat struck Haydar, allowing the group to escape. Murat, determined, contacted Fazil again, demanding official permission for the rally. Fazil, realizing he had little leverage after his failed operation, reluctantly agreed to allow the event and released Anton's family from custody, reuniting them at last. Fazil appeared on television, announcing that the AEI would permit rallies on the day of the lab's grand opening, surprising many. Asli, suspicious of his sudden change of heart, feared it was part of a larger trap, though others within +1 were thrilled by the chance to hold the rally without interference. Later that night, Murat and Sule shared a quiet moment. Murat confessed his feelings and gave her a white flower. On the anniversary of Kocaeli, a large, emotional crowd gathered to honor the lost. Sule led the rally, holding the rose plant given to her by Engin's grandmother as a symbol of peace. The event began peacefully, with more people joining. Fazil, watching, had other plans. Fazil secretly ordered his officers to incite chaos, and AEI forces attacked the rally participants, trying to turn it violent. Sule and her team rushed to the memorial. In the commotion, Sule dropped the rose plant, but managed to lift a single rose, symbolizing her resolve. Can report everything live. Asli handed her another rose, and a man from the crowd returned the full plant, passing it to Sule as the crowd cheered. Sule planted the rose in the earth, paying tribute to Engin and others who had suffered. Meanwhile, Asli, sensing danger, instructed Hakan of Hawk Wing to abort their mission, but Hakan defied her, insisting they proceed. Asli informed Murat, fearing the worst. Fazil, always ahead, had obtained the ID numbers of 6+1 members with access to the AEI building. He ordered Haydar to arrest them before they acted. As Hakan and his team approached the AEI building, they were apprehended by AEI officers, but in a twist, Anton and his team executed the arrests, ensuring the Hawk Wing members were safely taken back to +1. As the rally continued, Fazil gave a grand speech at the lab's inauguration. In a shocking move, he invited SWAT to participate in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Together, they cut the ribbon, signaling the lab's official opening. However, chaos ensued as the lab exploded, sending shockwaves through the city. Fazil, who had stayed outside, was the sole survivor. Murat and Sule, watching from their building, witnessed the devastation. Fazil, unscathed, left the scene, his expression unreadable. Fazil had orchestrated the explosion, framing +1 for the incident to shut down their ARDS research and tighten his grip on power. After the explosion, +1 members gathered in shock as Fazil appeared on television, making a public vow to find and punish those responsible. Fear rippled through the group, and they quickly realized that Istanbul was no longer safe. Fazil would inevitably trace the incident back to them. In light of the growing threat, the group made the painful decision to temporarily disband. Sule, however, urged Murat to stay committed to +1's cause, reminding him that he was their last hope for saving humanity. Anton, worried for the safety of his family, began planning to relocate them to a safer place and suggested Murat do the same, advising him to move his mother to Armutlu, far from the dangers of the 6th zone. As tensions rose, Anton urged Murat to take a stand and fight back. Fazil had been responsible for numerous deaths, always finding a way to shift the blame onto others, and Anton felt it was time to confront him. Osgur, on the other hand, was in a state of panic after watching Fazil's announcement. He warned Murat that continuing to work with +1 would only lead to their deaths, but Murat was tired of hiding. He refused to live in fear any longer. Despite Osgur's disbelief, Murat remained resolved. He pressed Osgur to explain what had been done to his brain. Osgur finally admitted that the experiment had failed on everyone except Murat, and the only reason it had worked on him might be tied to his mysterious connection with Haluk. Later, Haluk communicated with Murat through sign language, asking about Osgur. Haluk revealed that Osgur had attempted the same experiment on other patients, but none had shown the same outcomes as Murat. Taking this information, Murat went to Victor's hospital to inform him that Osgur's treatment had failed on others, and that something unusual had happened only in his case. Murat then went to visit Arif, who thanked him for saving him during the chaos. Afterward, he reunited with Sul, who informed him that +1 had made the difficult decision to disband for the time being, given the growing threat from the AEI. She told him they had to leave Istanbul and continue their work somewhere safer. Murat, feeling guilty for putting everyone in danger, considered going alone and urged Sul to take his mother to Armutlu, but Sul disagreed. She insisted that they stay together and finish what they had started, emphasizing that there was still hope for a cure. As the weight of their situation pressed down on them, they grew closer, eventually sharing a kiss, leading to a moment of intimacy. Meanwhile, Istanbul was placed under a state of emergency, making it nearly impossible for anyone to leave the city. In a show of force, the AEI destroyed the Kocaeli Memorial, crushing the rose plant that Sul had planted as a symbol of peace and hope. Realizing time was running out, Murat told his mother, Emel, to gather Arif's family and make their way to Armutlu, while he and Sul rushed to +1's headquarters to warn the others of the escalating danger, advising them to go underground until the situation settled. Just as they began preparing to flee, AEI officers stormed the building, and in the ensuing chaos, Arif was shot. Murat, desperate to save his friend, rushed him to Osgur's place. Initially, Osgur refused to open the door, but Murat pleaded with him, warning that Arif would die without help. Reluctantly, Osgur let them in and treated Arif's wounds, but the situation was dire. Osgur informed Murat that the bullet needed to be removed by a doctor. Murat then took Arif to Victor's hospital, where Victor confirmed Arif's condition was critical. As Murat sat with him, Arif expressed his fear of dying. Moments later, Arif passed away, leaving Murat devastated. Heartbroken and enraged, Murat confronted Haluk, demanding answers and urging him to speak. However, Haluk remained eerily calm, refusing to respond. Murat, overwhelmed with frustration and grief, broke down in tears. Meanwhile, Fazil, accompanied by Haider, stormed the +1 headquarters, but found it deserted. Furious, Fazil ordered Haider to track down the remaining members and bring them in. Back at a secret location, Murat entered a room where Anton, his loyal men, and several +1 members were waiting. In a moment of vulnerability, Murat revealed a long-held secret. He used to work for the AEI and had been the mastermind behind Project X. He openly confessed this to the group and declared that he was now fully committed to fighting against the AEI. The group, despite the revelation, rallied around Murat, supporting his decision. After Arif's funeral, Murat handed Khan a recording to broadcast over the radio after everyone had left the ceremony, ensuring Arif's message lived on. Anton then ordered his men to escort the remaining +1 members to safety in Armutlu, while the group began preparing for the battles ahead. Murat bid an emotional farewell to his mother, telling her to go to safety, but he made it clear that he couldn't leave Istanbul without Haluk, as Haluk was essential to finding a cure. Though Sul was deeply afraid that Haluk would infect all of them, Murat reassured her that he would protect them, and together they retrieved Haluk. As the AEI raided Victor's hospital, Murat and his team narrowly escaped through a back route. Just as they were getting away, an AEI truck intercepted them. In an unexpected turn, Haluk, who had been mostly silent, began speaking, causing the AEI officers to start jabbering uncontrollably. This distraction gave Murat and his team the chance to escape once again. Later, Murat called Osgur, hoping to convince him to join +1, but Osgur refused, admitting that he had chosen the wrong side and would not switch alliances. At the dock, Errol awaited Murat and his team but informed them that AEI agents had already swarmed the area. With limited options, Murat instructed Errol to proceed with their backup plan. Soon after, a seaplane arrived to extract them. The pilot informed the group that the AEI was transferring jabberers from Zone 6 to Zone 5, which struck a chord with Anton, whose family was in Zone 5. After saying his goodbyes to everyone, Anton left in a van to head toward his family. As the AEI located Murat's team and gave chase, they managed to board the seaplane just in time. With Haluk on board, they took off, narrowly escaping the AEI once again. Their journey continued, the weight of their mission heavier than ever, but they had each other, and the hope that Haluk could be the key to the cure. As the seaplane soared above the city, the +1 broadcast aired, with Khan transmitting Murat's pre-recorded message over the radio. In his speech, Murat spoke with a determined and hopeful tone, expressing his belief that they were close to finding a cure for the virus. He called for unity and resilience, urging everyone to continue the fight, despite the odds stacked against them. Suddenly, Sul's phone rang. Murat, unsure who it could be, picked it up. To his shock, the voice on the other end belonged to none other than Fazil. Murat exchanged glances at Sul, his eyes wide with disbelief.